In a world where fairy tales seemed reserved for storybooks, Destiny was about to write an extraordinary chapter in a Seattle coffee shop. Sarah Mitchell wasn't looking for love, not with $27 until payday, a daughter to raise, alone, and dreams that felt like distant stars in her night sky. But magic has a way of appearing in life's smallest moments. That rainy morning, when she spotted him, tall, distinguished, yet endearingly flustered as he searched for his missing wallet, something deeper than sympathy made her heart skip a beat. Perhaps it was the way his eyes crinkled with embarrassment, or how his rain-dampened suit couldn't hide the quiet dignity in his bearing. One impulsive decision to buy a stranger's coffee was about to unlock a door she never knew existed. Because James Cooper wasn't just any man caught in the rain. He was the CEO of Seattle's most prestigious company, and in his eyes, Sarah was about to become much more than just his coffee shop savior. This isn't just another romance story. This is about how one woman's kindness in a moment of chaos would transform not only her destiny, but rewrite the very meaning of happily ever after in the corporate world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The yellow glow of Sarah Mitchell's desk lamp cast shadows across the wall of sticky notes that had become her vision board of survival. Each one represented a different job application, interview date or deadline, a rainbow-colored mosaic of hope and determination. 3:47 a.m. glowed on her phone screen as she added another note. Cooper and Shaw International, Marketing Coordinator, position, status, pending. Mommy? A small voice pulled her attention from the wall. Emma stood in the doorway of their modest two-bedroom apartment's living room, clutching her worn stuffed penguin, Mr. Waddles. At 8 years old, she had her mother's honey-brown hair and an old soul's wisdom in her eyes. "Hey, sweetheart," Sarah whispered, opening her arms. "Another bad dream?" Emma padded across the carpet and crawled into her lap, a routine they'd perfected over the years. "Why are you still awake?" Sarah brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead, buying time to phrase her answer. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that her mother had spent the last 4 hours applying for jobs after finishing her evening shift at the diner? That the 20s and ones stuffed in her apron pocket barely covered next week's dance lessons, let alone the stack of bills threatening to avalanche off the kitchen counter? "Just doing some grown-up paperwork," she said instead, kissing the top of Emma's head. The scent of strawberry shampoo mixed with the coffee that seemed permanently embedded in Sarah's clothes these days. The essence of their life together. Their apartment, though small, was a testament to Sarah's determination to create a home. Children's artwork brightened the walls, competing for space with Emma's dance recital photos and honor roll certificates. A bookshelf overflowed with both fairy tales and business management textbooks, Sarah's night school investment in their future. The coffee table doubled as storage for Emma's homework and Sarah's study materials, a perfect metaphor for how they'd learned to blend their lives. Morning came too quickly, heralded by the ancient coffee maker's gurgle, Sarah's most reliable alarm clock. She'd bought it second-hand when she first got the apartment, and its daily survival seemed as miraculous as her own. Emma sat at their small kitchen table, spooning cereal, while Sarah packed her lunch, peanut butter and banana, sandwich, apple slices, and a cookie she'd saved from her diner shift. "Mom, is it okay if I stay at Jenny's after dance class today? Her mom said she could drive me home." Emma's voice carried the careful tone of someone who knew exactly how complicated schedule changes could be. Sarah checked her mental calendar. Thursday meant double shifts. Diner in the morning, bookstore in the evening. Mrs. Chen from next door usually watched Emma between activities, a blessing of neighborly kindness that Sarah repaid with baked goods and handyman favors. "Let me text Mrs. Rivera to make sure," Sarah said, already reaching for her phone. Jenny's mom was another single mother, and they'd formed an informal support network. If she's sure it's no trouble, a notification flashed across her screen. Application status update, Cooper and Shaw International. Sarah's heart stuttered. She'd been applying to the prestigious company for months, drawn by their innovative marketing campaigns and reputation for employee development. The position would mean regular hours, benefits, and most importantly, a chance to use her business degree. The one she'd earned through 6 years of night classes, stolen study hours, and more coffee than she cared to remember. "Mom, are you okay?" Emma's voice snapped her back to the present. "You look funny." Sarah forced a smile, tucking the phone away, unopened. She couldn't bear another rejection, not right now. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just remembered something for work." She checked the time, 7:15. "Ready for school? We need to leave in 10 minutes if we're going to stop for hot chocolate." Emma's face lit up. It was their weekly tradition, a small luxury they allowed themselves every Thursday morning. One regular hot chocolate, extra whipped cream, split between 2 cups. Their secret ritual of making something small stretched just a little further. As they walked the 3 blocks to Cascade Coffee, Sarah's mind wandered to her bank account. $27 until payday. The hot chocolate would take 4 of those, but Emma's smile was worth the squeeze. They'd make it work. They always did. The coffee shop's warmth enveloped them as they entered, the familiar scent of roasted beans and pastries a comforting constant in their ever-changing routine. Sarah didn't know it yet, but in less than an hour, she'd be back here making a split-second decision that would change everything. For now, she simply held her daughter's hand, ordered their shared drink, and savored these quiet moments before the world fully awakened. Looking down at Emma's whipped cream mustache, Sarah felt the familiar surge of fierce love and determination. This little girl was her universe, her reason for pushing through every exhausted morning, every late-night study session, every moment of doubt. Whatever the day might bring, they would face it together, armed with sticky notes, shared hot chocolate, and an unshakable belief that tomorrow could be better than today. An hour later, Sarah pushed through Cascade Coffee's door again, this time alone. Her diner uniform was tucked into her oversized bag, ready for her shift. The morning rush was in full swing, the line stretching nearly to the door. She checked her phone. Enough time for 1 coffee before work, a necessary fuel for the day. Ahead. The man ahead of her ordered a complex drink that required the barista to repeat it twice. Behind her, someone sighed heavily. She glanced back, catching her breath at the sight. He was tall, with salt and pepper hair that somehow looked elegant even when slightly disheveled. His charcoal suit was obviously expensive, though rumpled. From the rain. Something about him seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. He was patting his pockets with increasing desperation, his expression growing more frustrated by the second. "I could have sworn," he muttered, checking. "His briefcase. Next!" the barista called. Sarah stepped forward, then hesitated. The stranger looked genuinely distressed now, his face flushed with embarrassment. "I'll get his too," she heard herself say, surprising them both. "Whatever he's having." He looked up, startled. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly." "Please," Sarah smiled, surprising herself with her confidence. "Consider it karma banking. Someone will do something nice for me later." Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. His were a warm brown, crinkled at the corners, with what she suspected was usually laughter rather than stress. "That's incredibly kind of you," he said softly. Then, turning to the barista, "Just a regular coffee, black." He looked back at Sarah. "Though I insist on paying you back." "No need," she said, handing over her card and silently calculating the remaining $23 in her account. "Everyone forgets their wallet sometimes." As they waited for their drinks, he introduced himself. "James Cooper," he said, extending his hand. "And I'm thoroughly embarrassed." Sarah froze, her hand halfway to his. "James Cooper. The James Cooper." Her mind flashed to the countless times she'd seen his photo on the Cooper and Shaw website, in business magazines, in her research before each job application. But in those photos, he was always polished, distant, corporate, not this approachable man with rain-dampened hair and grateful eyes. Sarah Mitchell, she managed, taking his hand. His grip was warm, firm, but gentle. And really, it's nothing. Sarah. Mitchell, he repeated, as if testing the name. Why do I feel like I've seen that name recently? The barista called their drinks before she could respond. As they collected them, James pulled something from his briefcase. A business card. He turned it over, scribbling on the back before offering it to her. My personal number, he explained, for when you'll let me repay you for the coffee. And because, he paused, that same electric something passing between them again. I have a feeling we were supposed to meet today. Sarah took the card, her fingers trembling slightly. The front bore his official title, James Cooper, CEO, Cooper and Shaw International. On the back, his handwriting was elegant but casual. For my coffee shop savior, JC, followed by a phone number. I should warn you, she said, gathering her courage. I have an ulterior motive. I've applied to Cooper and Shaw, several times actually, marketing department. Instead of the awkwardness she expected, his face lit up with genuine interest. Have you? Well, that explains why your name seemed familiar. I was reviewing applications just yesterday. He studied her with new appreciation. Tell me, Ms. Mitchell, do you always buy coffee for stranded CEOs? Or am I special? Only the ones who look like they're having a really rough morning, she quipped, surprising herself again. Where was this confidence coming from? He laughed, a rich sound that seemed to warm the entire coffee shop. Would you have time for a proper interview, say tomorrow morning? Sarah's heart leaped, even as her practical side kicked in. I'd need to arrange childcare. I have an 8-year-old daughter. She expected his interest to cool at the mention of her child. Instead, his smile softened. Bring her. The cafe across from our office has excellent hot chocolate. I'm told that's important information for 8-year-olds. Before Sarah could respond, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and grimaced. Board meeting, I'm already late, which explains the... He gestured to his rumpled appearance. Tomorrow, 9 o'clock? Sarah nodded, still slightly dazed. He raised his coffee cup in a small salute before heading to the door. Just before leaving, he turned back. Ms. Mitchell, thank you, not just for the coffee, for reminding me that sometimes the best moments in life are the unplanned ones. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah holding a business card that felt like a golden ticket, her heart racing with possibilities she'd never dared to imagine. The coffee shop seemed somehow brighter, as if the morning sun had finally broken through. Seattle's perpetual clouds. She barely noticed the coffee stain on the card's corner, already imagining it framed someday, the artifact of a moment when kindness and fate converged over 2 cups of coffee. Sarah's hands trembled as she scribbled. The interview details on a napkin during her diner shift. 9 a.m. Cooper and Shaw Building, Café Bistro. Her neat handwriting deteriorated into excited squiggles as reality set in. She was having coffee with James Cooper, not just the CEO of her dream company, but a man whose warm brown eyes had occupied her thoughts all morning. Order up! Marco's voice from the kitchen snapped her back to reality. She tucked the napkin into her apron pocket, right next to James's coffee-stained business card. Throughout her shift, her fingers kept brushing against both, as if making sure they were real. You're glowing today, Mrs. Chen observed when Sarah picked up Emma from after-school care. Something good happen? Maybe, Sarah replied, watching Emma gather her books. Actually, I need a huge favor. Could you watch Emma tomorrow morning? I have an interview. Cooper and Shaw? Mrs. Chen's eyes sparkled. She'd heard all about Sarah's applications over their shared Sunday dinners. Sort of. It's complicated. Sarah found herself blushing. Actually, Emma's invited too. The CEO suggested it. Mrs. Chen's eyebrows shot up, but before she could respond, Emma bounded over. "Mom, I got an A on my science project." The pride in Emma's voice made Sarah's heart swell. Her daughter's resilience, her ability to thrive despite their challenges, never ceased to amaze her. "That's wonderful, sweetie. How about we celebrate with breakfast out tomorrow? I have something special to tell you." Later that evening, after dinner and homework, Sarah sat Emma down on their worn but comfortable couch. "Remember this morning's hot chocolate?" she began. Emma nodded, cuddling closer. "With extra whipped cream. Well, after I dropped you at school, something amazing happened." Sarah pulled out James's card, showing it to Emma. "I met someone who might be able to help Mommy get that job I've been hoping for." Emma studied the card with serious concentration. "Cooper and Shaw. That's the building with the sparkly windows. The one you always look at." Sarah smiled, remembering how often they'd walked past the gleaming tower, Emma making up stories about the people inside. "That's right, and tomorrow we're going to have breakfast with Mr. Cooper himself." Emma's eyes widened. "The boss of the whole building. The very same. Sarah paused, wondering how to explain their meeting. "He forgot his wallet at the coffee shop, and I helped him out. He turned out to be very nice." "Is he handsome?" Emma asked with 8-year-old directness. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "Emma, you're blushing. He is." Emma giggled, then grew serious. "But Mom, what are you going to wear?" The question triggered a mild panic. Sarah rushed to her closet, Emma trailing behind. They surveyed her options: the black pantsuit she'd worn to graduation, a navy dress from her last interview, and various mix-and-match pieces from her business casual wardrobe. "The dress," Emma declared with authority. "You look like a princess in it." Sarah held it up, scrutinizing it in the mirror. The cut was classic, professional, but feminine. "You think?" "Definitely. Can I help you pick your shoes, too?" They spent the next hour planning outfits, practicing introduction handshakes, Emma's idea, and role-playing interview questions. Emma played a remarkably stern CEO, though her version was more interested in asking about favorite ice cream flavors than marketing strategies. As Sarah tucked Emma into bed, her daughter grabbed her hand. "Mom, are you scared?" Sarah sat on the edge of the bed, considering the question. "A little," she admitted, "but sometimes the scariest things turn out to be the best things. Like when I was scared of my dance recital, but then got a trophy." "Exactly like that." Sarah kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep, sweetheart. Tomorrow's a big day." After Emma drifted off, Sarah returned to her desk, pulling out the napkin with the interview details. Below it, she began writing potential questions, company facts, her qualifications. But her mind kept drifting to James's smile, the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, how he'd immediately included Emma in their plans. She opened her laptop, pulling up Cooper and Shaw's website. James's official photo was there, polished, professional, slightly intimidating. Nothing like the warm, slightly rumpled man from the coffee shop. She found herself wondering which version was the real James Cooper, and hoping she'd get the chance to find out. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Just confirming our meeting tomorrow. Looking forward to it. JC." Sarah stared at the message, a smile spreading across her face. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, "We'll be there. Thank you for the opportunity." His response came quickly. "Thank you for the coffee. And Sarah, bring that same confidence you showed this morning. It suits you." She fell asleep with the phone on her pillow, her dreams full of coffee shops, gleaming office towers, and warm brown eyes that crinkled when they smiled. 1 week later, Sarah stood in the gleaming lobby of Cooper and Shaw International, clutching the employee handbook to her chest like a shield. The interview had gone better than she'd imagined, James and Emma chatting about hot chocolate preferences while Sarah outlined her marketing ideas, a perfect blend of personal and professional that had ended with an immediate job offer. Now, watching employees stream through the security turnstiles with practiced ease, reality set in. Her sensible heels clicked against the marble floor as she approached the reception desk, conscious of how her target blazer stood out among the designer suits. Sarah Mitchell, Claire Davidson, head of HR. A slim woman in her 40s appeared, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "I'll be handling your orientation." She gave Sarah a quick once-over that felt more like an assessment than a welcome. "Though I must say, your hiring process was unconventional." Sarah followed Claire into the elevator, her stomach dropping not just from the rapid ascent to the 42nd floor. The handbook in her arms felt heavier with each passing floor. She'd spent the weekend memorizing every policy, determined to prove she deserved this chance. "The marketing department is down this way." Claire's voice carried a subtle edge. "Though, normally, new hires go through a more thorough screening process. Multiple interviews, background checks, the usual corporate protocols." She paused outside a glass-walled conference room. "But I suppose having coffee with the CEO fast-tracks things?" Before Sarah could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Actually, Claire, I find that spontaneous encounters often reveal more about a person's character than rehearsed interviews." James stood in the doorway, his presence both a relief and a complication. How someone treats a stranger who needs help says more than any background check. Claire's smile tightened. "Of course, Mr. Cooper. I'll just get Sarah settled at her desk." "I have a better idea," James said. "Why don't I show her around? I'm sure you have more pressing HR matters to attend to." As Claire retreated, Sarah caught the flash of displeasure in her eyes. James turned to her with an apologetic smile. "I should have warned you about Claire. She's excellent at her job, but she can be protective of corporate hierarchy." "You don't need to explain," Sarah said quickly, "or make exceptions for me. I don't want special treatment." "Is that what you think this is?" James gestured for her to follow him through the office. "Sarah, I reviewed your application materials after we met. Multiple degrees earned while working full-time and raising a daughter. 6 years of consistent career progression. Glowing references from every employer. You're not here because of a coffee shop encounter. You're here because you're exactly what this company needs." They stopped at a corner desk with a stunning view of the Seattle skyline. "This is you," James said. "The marketing team meets at 10, which gives you—" He checked his watch. "About an hour to settle in." "Thank you," Sarah said softly. "For everything? So don't thank me yet," he smiled. "Wait until you've survived your first team meeting. Oh, and Sarah?" He paused. "That blazer? It looks perfect for the job." As James walked away, Sarah sank into her chair, allowing herself a moment to take it all in. Her desk faced east, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A new laptop sat ready, its screen displaying the Cooper & Shaw logo. She opened the employee handbook again, this time focusing on the company's mission statement: innovation through integrity, success through service. "So, you're the coffee shop girl." A voice interrupted her reading. A young woman leaned against her desk, designer handbag dangling from her arm. "I'm Melissa, Claire's assistant. Word of advice? The fast track isn't always the smoothest ride." "I'm not looking for a fast track," Sarah replied, keeping her voice level. "I'm just here to work." "Aren't we all?" Melissa's laugh tinkled like ice in a glass. "Just watch your step. Claire has a long memory, and she doesn't appreciate when people bypass proper channels." She straightened up. "Meeting rooms down the hall. Don't be late." Sarah watched her go, then turned back to the handbook. Under the mission statement, someone had added a handwritten note. "Remember why you started." The handwriting matched. The coffee-stained business card she still carried in her wallet. Taking a deep breath, she opened her laptop and began to prepare for the meeting. Through the glass walls, she could see James in his office, engrossed in a phone call. He glanced up, caught her eye, and gave her a quick, encouraging nod. She nodded back, then focused on her screen. She hadn't come this far to let office politics or intimidation tactics derail her. Emma's drawing of her in a business suit was tucked into her notebook. a reminder of who she was really doing this for. The view from her desk might be impressive, but it wasn't half as beautiful as her daughter's proud smile when she'd left for work this morning. The handbook lay open on her desk, its pages crisp and full of promise. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same determination that had gotten her through night school, single motherhood, and every other obstacle life had thrown her way. After all, she thought with a small smile, she'd already handled the CEO's coffee order perfectly. The presentation draft glowed on Sarah's laptop screen at 2 a.m., her third cup of coffee growing cold beside her keyboard, 2 weeks into her new role, and she'd been handed what everyone called the impossible project, revamping Cooper & Shaw's entire digital marketing strategy in time for their biggest product launch of the year. "It's career suicide," Melissa had whispered, not quite quietly enough. "Claire specifically requested you for it. No one's ever completed this project on time." But where others saw impossibility, Sarah saw opportunity. Her years of juggling, night classes, motherhood, and multiple jobs had taught her something about making the impossible possible. She'd spent her evenings after Emma's bedtime analyzing competitor strategies, studying market trends, and crafting a presentation that would either make or break her career. Her phone buzzed softly. A text from James. "Lights still on in your office. Go home, Sarah. The work will be there tomorrow." She smiled at his concern but kept typing. The presentation was nearly perfect, but nearly wasn't good enough. Not when Claire would be watching for any mistake, any sign of weakness. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, adding the final touches to her revolutionary approach, a social media campaign that would transform Cooper & Shaw's corporate image from distant industry giant to approachable innovation leader. A soft knock at her door made her jump. James stood there, 2 fresh cups of coffee in hand. "I thought I told you to go home." "I thought you'd left hours ago," she countered, accepting the coffee gratefully. He settled into the chair across from her desk, loosening his tie. "Board meeting prep. Now show me what's keeping you up at this hour." Sarah hesitated. "I don't want you to think I'm asking for help." "Good, because I'm not offering any." His eyes crinkled with that now familiar warmth. "I'm just a fellow workaholic, curious about what's on your mind." She turned her laptop around, watching his face as he read. His expression remained neutral, but she caught the slight raise of his eyebrows at her more innovative suggestions. "This is unexpected," he said finally, "in a good way. You're suggesting we completely revolutionize how we connect with our audience." "People don't just want products anymore," Sarah explained, her exhaustion forgotten in her enthusiasm. "They want stories, connections, authenticity. Look at our current social media presence. It's all corporate announcements and product features. But what if we showed them the heart of Cooper & Shaw, the innovation process, the people behind, the products, the real impact we have on customers' lives?" She pulled up her draft of the new content calendar. "We start with employee spotlights, behind-the-scenes glimpses of our development teams, real customer success stories. Build trust first, then introduce the new product line as part of our ongoing narrative." James was silent for a long moment, studying the screens. "You know Claire will fight this. It's too different from our traditional approach." "I know." Sarah straightened in her chair. "But sometimes different is exactly what you need." Their eyes met over the laptop, and something shifted in the air between them. James cleared his throat. "The board meets tomorrow at 9. Be ready to present this." "Tomorrow?" Sarah's heart raced. "But it's not scheduled until next week." "Consider it an executive decision." He stood, straightening his tie. "Oh, and Sarah, wear that navy dress again, the one from your first day. It suits." A revolution. After he left, Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind spinning. Through the glass walls, she could see James in his office, his silhouette strong against the city lights. He believed in her vision. Now she just had to make everyone else see it too. She reached for her phone, typing a quick text to Mrs. Chen about watching Emma for a few extra hours tomorrow. Then she opened her presentation one last time, adding a personal touch she'd been afraid to include before, a mock-up of Cooper and Shaw's new social media feed, featuring a photo of James from that first morning in the coffee shop, caught in a genuine laugh. Below it, the caption read, "At Cooper and Shaw, every innovation begins with a human moment." It was risky, personal, perhaps too bold. But as she finally packed up her things, Sarah realized she'd stopped worrying about what Claire would think. This wasn't about office politics anymore. This was about transforming a company she was growing to love, led by a man who'd given her a chance when all she had to offer was a cup of coffee and kindness. Emma sat at her usual spot in the Cooper and Shaw lobby, working on her homework while waiting for her mum to finish a late meeting. The security guard, Tony, had already brought her a hot chocolate, a routine they'd developed over the past month. Her newest drawing lay half-finished on the marble coffee table, her mom in a dark blue business suit, standing next to a tall, "A man with kind eyes, is that supposed to be me?" a familiar voice asked. Emma looked up to find James Cooper smiling down at her artwork. "Maybe," she grinned. "Mom says you're not usually this messy, though." She pointed to the slightly rumpled suit she'd drawn him in. James laughed, settling into the chair beside her. "Your mum still hasn't let me live down that first morning, has she?" He studied the drawing more closely. "Though I have to say, you captured my hair perfectly, especially the grey parts. Mum says the grey makes you look distinguished." Emma carefully pronounced the word she'd overheard her mother use while talking to Mrs. Chen. A warm smile spread across James's face. "Does she now?" He glanced toward the elevators. "Speaking of your mom, she's presenting some brilliant ideas to the board right now, ideas that might change the whole company." Emma nodded seriously. "She practiced with me last night. I liked the part about showing real people instead of just products." She paused, then added, "Mom was nervous, but I told her she's like my dance teacher says, when you practice enough you don't have to be scared anymore." "That's very wise advice," James said, his expression softening. "Your mom talks about you all the time, you know. She's incredibly proud of you." "I'm proud of her too," Emma replied, returning to her drawing. "She smiles more now, and she has time to help me with homework instead of going to night school." She looked up at James. "And it's nice that she has a friend at work. Mom didn't have many friends at her old jobs." James seemed to catch his breath for a moment. "I'm glad we can be friends with your mom," he said carefully. "She's a very special person." "You like her," Emma stated matter-of-factly, adding some final touches to her drawing. "Not just as a friend. I can tell because you look at her the same way Prince Charming looks at Cinderella in my books." Before James could respond, the elevator dinged. Sarah stepped out, her face glowing with triumph. "I did it!" she exclaimed, then stopped short at the sight of James sitting with Emma. "Oh, I didn't expect—" "Mom!" Emma jumped up, drawing in hand. "Mr. Cooper was helping me with my art. Look, I drew you both." Sarah took the drawing, her cheeks flushing slightly as she studied it. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Though I'm not sure Mr. Cooper wants to be in our family pictures." "I'd be honored," James said quietly, his eyes meeting Sarah's. The air seemed to crackle between them, making Emma smile knowingly. "The board loved your presentation," James continued, standing up. "Every single suggestion was approved. You're going to revolutionize how Cooper and Shaw connects with the world. We should celebrate," Emma declared. "Can Mr. Cooper come for pizza night?" Sarah's eyes widened. "Oh, honey, I'm sure Mr. Cooper has other plans." "Actually," James interrupted, "pizza sounds perfect. If you'll have me?" Emma watched her mother's face soften, saw the way her eyes lit up, even as she tried to maintain professional distance. "Well, we do make pretty amazing homemade pizza. Emma's the chief topping coordinator." "It's a very important job," Emma added solemnly, gathering her books and the drawing. "You can help, Mr. Cooper, but you have to follow my rules about proper pepperoni placement." As they walked toward the parking garage, Emma trailing slightly behind, she watched her mom and James fall into easy conversation. Their shoulders brushed occasionally, and both seemed to lean into these accidental touches. Emma smiled to herself, adding mental notes for her next drawing. Maybe this time she'd add a heart above them, just like in her favorite fairy tales. The email appeared in Claire's inbox at 8:47 a.m. Anonymous complaint, workplace conduct concerns. Sarah caught a glimpse of it on Melissa's monitor as she walked past, her stomach knotting as she saw her own name in the preview text. The whispers had started after the board meeting success. At first, they were subtle, raised eyebrows when James stopped by her desk, meaningful glances when they left the office at similar times. But after pizza night, when Emma had excitedly told Tony, the security guard, all about Mr. Cooper making funny faces with the pepperoni, the rumors exploded. "Did you hear?" Sarah overheard one intern whisper to another in the break room. "She's got her daughter calling him Uncle James already. Talk about a calculated move." Sarah gripped her coffee mug tighter, forcing herself to walk past without comment. She hadn't asked Emma to call James anything. The nickname had evolved naturally during their weekly pizza nights, which had somehow become a tradition over the past 3 weeks. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Quick meeting in my office. Need your input on the social media rollout." Sarah hesitated, aware of the eyes watching her from surrounding cubicles. Every interaction with James now felt weighted with implications, scrutinized for hidden meanings, yet she couldn't deny the flutter in her heart when she saw his name on her screen. "On my way," she replied, grabbing her tablet and the latest analytics report. Claire emerged from her office just as Sarah passed. "Oh, Sarah, a word?" Her tone was honey-sweet poison. "We've received some concerns about your rapid advancement in the company. Perhaps we should discuss appropriate workplace boundaries?" Sarah met her gaze steadily. "My work speaks for itself, Claire. The social media campaign has increased engagement by 200% in just 2 weeks. Yes, your personal touch with leadership has certainly been engaging." Claire's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Just remember, meteoric rises often lead to spectacular falls." Before Sarah could respond, James's voice cut through the tension. "Claire, I need those Q3 reports on my desk by noon." He turned to Sarah. "Ready for that meeting?" In his office, Sarah sank into the visitor's chair, her professional facade cracking. "They think I'm sleeping my way to the top." James's expression darkened. "Who said that?" "Nobody. Everybody. There's an anonymous complaint in Claire's inbox." Sarah ran a hand through her hair. "Maybe we should stop the pizza nights, create some distance. Is that what you want?" Their eyes met across the desk. No, it wasn't what she wanted. The pizza nights had become the highlight of her week. Emma's laughter, James's terrible jokes, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. But was it worth risking? Everything she'd worked for. "I worked so hard to get here," she whispered. "Night school, countless rejections, years of trying to prove myself. Now they think none of that matters because I bought you a cup of coffee." James stood, pacing to the window. "When I forgot my wallet that morning, I was actually running away," he admitted. "The board wanted me to take the company in a more aggressive direction. Layoffs, cost-cutting, corporate ruthlessness. I was heading to the airport, ready to resign rather than become that kind of leader." He turned back to her. "Then you bought me a coffee, talked about kindness and karma, and reminded me that business doesn't have to lose its humanity to be successful." Sarah felt her breath catch. "James, your marketing campaign isn't just about social media. It's about changing corporate culture. You're not succeeding because of me, Sarah. I'm becoming a better CEO because of you." A knock at the door interrupted them. Melissa stood there, smirking. "Sorry to interrupt your meeting, but Claire needs to see you both. Immediately." Sarah gathered her courage and stood. Whatever Claire had planned, she wouldn't let office politics destroy what she'd built, her career or her growing feelings for the man who saw her true worth. Sarah's late-night review of the quarterly reports wasn't just about proving herself anymore. Something in the numbers didn't add up. and her years of juggling tight budgets had given her an eye for discrepancies. The error jumped out from the spreadsheet like a neon sign, a multi-million-dollar mistake in the company's new product launch calculations, hidden beneath layers of complex formulas. Her hand shook as she traced the digital paper trail. The mistake originated from HR's initial budget approval, specifically from files Claire had signed off on. If this went unnoticed, the entire product launch, her social media campaign, James's vision for the company's future, all of it, would implode in a catastrophic failure. "Mom?" Emma's voice startled her. "It's past midnight." Sarah looked up from her laptop, finding her daughter in pajamas, clutching Mr. Waddles. "I'm sorry, sweetie. Did I wake you?" "No. I had a dream about Dad again." Emma climbed into her lap, a rare occurrence now that she was practically grown up at 8.5. "You had your worried face on, like when Dad left." Sarah hugged her daughter close, the spreadsheets momentarily forgotten. "This is different, baby, I promise. I just found something at work that needs fixing." "Is it about Mr. Cooper? Lily at school said her mom says he's your boyfriend." Sarah sighed. Even the elementary school grapevine wasn't immune to gossip. "James is complicated, sweetie. Right now I need to help him save the company from a big mistake, but I'm not sure he'll like how I found it." Emma considered this with childlike wisdom. "When I found out Jenny was cheating on her math test, I didn't want to tell because she's my friend. But you said sometimes being a good friend means telling hard truths." Sarah stared at her daughter, then back at the laptop screen. The numbers blurred before her eyes, but the path forward suddenly became clear. She reached for her phone, hesitating only briefly before typing, "Need to see you first thing tomorrow. Found something crucial. S." James's reply came instantly. "I'll be in at 7. Everything okay?" "Not sure yet," she texted back, "but it will be." After tucking Emma back into bed, Sarah returned to her research. The error was clever, buried in a way that suggested either incredible incompetence or deliberate deception. Claire's digital signature appeared on every crucial document, but something felt off about the approval timestamps. She dug deeper, accessing archived versions of the files. There, a pattern emerged. Small adjustments, each seemingly insignificant, but compounding into a devastating mathematical butterfly effect. Claire hadn't just made a mistake. She'd orchestrated a time bomb that would devastate the company's reputation and tank their stock price. But why? Sarah pulled up Claire's personnel file, her marketing access credentials giving her just enough clearance to see the basic details. Something caught her eye. Before Cooper and Shaw, Claire had worked for their main competitor, Summit Industries. A quick social media search revealed photos of Claire at recent Summit corporate events, always in the background, always watching. Sarah's blood ran cold. This wasn't about office politics or professional jealousy. This was corporate sabotage. She began taking screenshots, documenting everything. The first light of dawn was creeping through her windows when she finally had it all organized. A digital trail of breadcrumbs leading straight to Claire's deliberate deception. Her phone buzzed. "Just parked. Coffee's waiting in my office." Sarah gathered her evidence, her heart pounding. She wasn't just about to accuse the head of HR of corporate espionage. She was about to test whether James's faith in her extended beyond their growing personal connection. As she drove to the office, Emma's words echoed in her mind. Sometimes being a good friend means telling hard truths. But would exposing Claire's betrayal cost her everything she'd built at Cooper and Shaw? And more importantly, would it cost her the man she was slowly, surely, falling in love with? The security camera in the corner of Claire's office blinked silently, recording what was about to become a defining moment at Cooper and Shaw. Sarah stood in the doorway, laptop tucked under her arm, her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, showing a woman she barely recognized, confident, determined, unafraid. "Claire, we need to talk about the Q3 reports." Claire barely glanced up from her computer. I'm quite busy, Sarah. Some of us didn't get our positions through personal connections. You mean like your connections at Summit Industries? Sarah's voice was steady as she placed her laptop on Claire's desk, turning it to show the evidence. The dinner parties, the private meetings, the data transfers, it's all here. The color drained from Claire's face. You've been spying on me? No, I've been doing my job. The same job you've been trying to sabotage. Sarah opened another file. The product launch calculations were deliberately corrupted. You buried the errors so deep that most people wouldn't catch them. Unfortunately for you, I spent 6 years studying accounting while working as a waitress. I know creative math when I see it. Claire's practiced smile turned predatory. Interesting theory, but do you really think James will believe you over? Me? I've been here for 15 years. You've been here for what? 5 minutes, and let's be honest, we all know why he hired you. That's exactly what I want to know. James's voice cut through the tension. He stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Why did you hire her, Claire? Was it because you knew her attention to detail would eventually expose you? Claire's composure cracked. James, I can explain. The timestamps on the files. He stepped into the office. The offshore account transfers? The leaked information to Summit? He pointed to Sarah's laptop. She found it all. Every breadcrumb you thought you'd hidden. I was protecting the company. Claire stood, her carefully maintained facade crumbling. Summit's offer was generous. They understand business, not this humanitarian approach you've adopted since. She arrived. She gestured dismissively at Sarah. Coffee shop kindness doesn't build corporate empires. No, Sarah interjected quietly. But it builds loyalty, trust, the very things you sold to our competitors. Security appeared in the doorway, summoned by James's silent signal. As they escorted Claire out, her final words hung in the air. You've gone soft, James. She's made you weak. The office fell silent, except for the gentle hum of computers and the distant sound of Claire's heels clicking down the hallway. Sarah stood frozen, the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Sarah, James began, I understand if you need me to resign, she cut in. The rumors, the scandal. It might be easier if I just... Stop. James crossed the room in 3 strides, taking her hands in his. You just saved this company. More than that, you proved exactly why I've been falling in love with you. Sarah's heart stopped. What? Your integrity, your brilliance, the way you fight for what's right. His hands tightened on hers. I didn't fall in love with you because you bought me coffee. I fell in love with you because you showed me what real strength looks like. Through the glass walls, they could see employees gathering, watching the scene unfold. For once, Sarah didn't care about the audience. I've been falling in love with... You too, she whispered, but I needed you to know I could stand on my own first. Stand on your own? He smiled. Sarah, you just took down a corporate spy while revolutionizing our entire business model. You're the strongest person I know. The security camera blinked again, recording their first kiss, a moment that would become part of Cooper and Shaw. Legend. Later, the footage would show 2 people who found each other through coffee and kindness and built something stronger through trust and truth. But right now, in this moment, they were just Sarah and James finally letting their hearts catch up to what they'd known since that first morning in the coffee shop. Sometimes love arrives in unexpected ways, and the best partnerships are built on a foundation of both professional respect and personal courage. The annual Cooper and Shaw Charity Gala transformed the office's usual corporate atmosphere into something magical. Through the lens of a photographer's camera, Sarah caught a candid moment, James kneeling to help Emma adjust her first formal dress, both of them laughing at some shared joke. The image would later capture perfectly how naturally he had woven himself into their lives. Your daughter has him wrapped around her little finger, James's sister Catherine observed, joining Sarah at the refreshment table. I haven't seen him this happy since before our parents passed. Sarah turned, surprised. In the month she'd known him, James had never mentioned his parents. I didn't know. Car accident 10 years ago, Catherine explained softly. He was supposed to be driving them to the airport, but got caught up in a board meeting. He's carried that guilt ever since, throwing himself into the company they built. She smiled warmly at Sarah, until a certain coffee shop encounter reminded him there's more to life than quarterly reports. Across the room, Emma was now teaching James some complicated clapping game, his expensive suit jacket discarded, his tie loosened. The other executives' children watched in amazement as their CEO played like one of them. "He told me about your parents too," Sarah said. "How they started Cooper and Shaw in their garage, built it on personal relationships rather than corporate takeovers. Mom would have adored you." Catherine squeezed her arm. She always said success meant nothing without someone to share it with. James forgot that for a while. The music changed to something slow and romantic. James looked up, catching Sarah's eye with a smile that still made her heart flutter. He whispered something to Emma, who nodded enthusiastically, and pushed him towards Sarah. "May I have this dance?" He extended his hand, eyes twinkling. "Your daughter's orders. She says we're being silly standing apart at a party." Sarah took his hand, letting him lead her to the dance floor. "She's quite the matchmaker these days." "Smart kid." He pulled her close, swaying to the music. "She gets that from her mother, James." Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Why didn't you tell me about your parents?" He was quiet for a moment, his hand warm against her back. "I didn't want you to see me differently. The guilt, the regret, it shaped who I was when we met. That morning in the coffee shop was the first time in years I'd let myself be late for anything. And now? He smiled down at her. "Now I have an 8-year-old scheduling my pizza nights and teaching me the importance of proper bedtime." Story voices. "Kind of hard to stay corporate rigid through that?" Emma appeared beside them, tugging on James's sleeve. "Can I cut in? Dad taught me how to waltz before he left, but I'm forgetting the steps." Sarah tensed slightly at the mention of her ex-husband. But James smoothly lifted Emma onto his feet. "Well, we can't have that. Though I should warn you, I learned from my mother, so these might be old-fashioned steps." "That's okay," Emma beamed up at him. "Old-fashioned can be good, like fairy tales." Sarah watched them dance, her heart full. A flash caught her attention, the photographer capturing another candid moment. But this one was different from the polished corporate photos that usually lined Cooper and Shaw's halls. This was real, unscripted, beautiful in its authenticity, just like their love story. The email hit every inbox in Cooper and Shaw simultaneously at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. Evidence of misconduct, Cooper and Shaw leadership. The attached documents formed a carefully crafted web of lies, weaving together manipulated timestamps of late-night meetings, edited security footage, and doctored expense reports, all suggesting an inappropriate relationship long before. "Sarah's official hire date. It's everywhere," Melissa whispered, hurrying past Sarah's desk. "Claire sent it to the board, the shareholders, even Summit Industries." Sarah sat frozen, staring at her computer screen. The documents looked real. Official letterhead, legitimate signatures, damning in their detailed implications. Claire had taken real moments, innocent coffee discussions, working late on the marketing campaign, pizza nights with Emma, and twisted them into something tawdry and calculated. James appeared at her office door, his face grim. "Board meeting. Now." The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, heavy with unspoken words. Just before the doors opened, James reached for her hand. "Whatever happens in there, remember, the truth has a way of surfacing." The boardroom was thick with tension. Sarah recognized most of the faces from the charity gala, but their earlier warmth had been replaced by professional skepticism. Catherine, James's sister, sat in the corner, her expression unreadable. "These are serious allegations," Gerald Matthews, the head of the board, began. "Ms. Mitchell, your rapid rise in the company, followed by the convenient exposure of Claire Davidson's activities, raises concerns." "With respect, sir," Sarah stepped forward, "every promotion, every project success is documented. My work..." Your work isn't in question, another board member interrupted. Your methods are. James moved to speak, but Sarah touched his arm. No, let me. She faced the board squarely. When I first walked into Cooper and Shaw, I carried a coffee-stained business card and a dream of proving myself. Since then, I've revolutionized our marketing strategy, increased engagement by 300%, and yes, exposed a corporate spy. Not because of any relationship, but because I'm good at my job. She pulled out her laptop. Claire's documents are manipulated. The metadata shows editing timestamps, all traced back to an IP address registered to Summit Industries. She projected the evidence onto the screen. She didn't just frame me. She proved her own guilt. The board members leaned forward, examining the technical details. Catherine spoke up from her corner. The question isn't just about the documents. It's about trust. James, if personal feelings clouded your judgment, they didn't, James interjected. They clarified it. Sarah's coffee shop kindness reminded me what this company was built on. Genuine human connection. Everything she's accomplished here has reinforced that vision. Gerald Matthews studied them both for a long moment. Ms. Mitchell, would you step outside? The board needs to discuss this privately. The next 30 minutes were the longest of Sarah's life. She sat in the waiting area, remembering Emma's words from months ago. Sometimes being a good friend means telling hard truths. She'd told the truth about Claire, about her feelings for James, about everything. Now she could only hope it was enough. The boardroom door opened. James emerged first, his expression giving nothing away. The board has reached a decision. Sarah stood, bracing herself for the worst. After everything, the career she'd built, the love she'd found, would Claire's revenge finally succeed in taking it all away? A recovered email chain changed everything. It arrived in the middle of Sarah's agonizing wait, forwarded by Catherine with a simple note. Found this in the archived server. You need to see it. The emails dated back months before Sarah had even applied to Cooper and Shaw, revealing conversations between Claire and Summit Industries executives. Their plan had been calculated from the start: hire someone they could easily discredit if their corporate espionage was discovered. Sarah had been chosen specifically because she was a single mother, someone they assumed would be desperate enough not to question her good fortune. The perfect scapegoat, Claire had written. When it all falls apart, everyone will believe she slept her way to the top. It's practically a cliché. Sarah's hands shook as she read the messages. The final email was the most damning. Claire's frustrated response when Sarah had unexpectedly discovered the accounting discrepancies. She's too competent. We need to move to Plan B. The boardroom door opened again. Catherine emerged first this time, tablet in hand. I've shared the emails with the board, she announced, but they'd like to hear from you one more time. Inside, the atmosphere had shifted. Gerald Matthews stood at the head of the table, the recovered emails displayed on the screen behind him. Ms. Mitchell, he began, his tone markedly different. It appears we owe you an apology. These emails make it clear that you were targeted by Claire Davidson long before your employment here. The question now becomes, what would you like us to do about it? Sarah felt James's presence beside her, supportive but silent, letting her handle this moment on her own. She took a deep breath. I want to continue doing my job, she said firmly. The social media campaign is just the beginning. I have plans for community engagement, employee advocacy programs, ways to show the world the real heart of Cooper and Shaw. And your relationship with James? Another board member asked. Is personal, Sarah replied. But if you're concerned about professional boundaries, I suggest an independent oversight committee for any projects we collaborate on. Complete transparency. Gerald Matthews nodded slowly. James, your thoughts? Sarah's right, James said. About all of it. Claire's actions proved what happens when we prioritize corporate games over genuine human connection. I trust this board to see the difference. Between a real scandal and a manufactured one. Catherine stood up. I move to formally dismiss all allegations against Sarah Mitchell and James Cooper. Furthermore, I suggest we promote Sarah to Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications, a position she's more than earned. The vote was unanimous. As the board filed out, Gerald Matthews paused beside Sarah. That first cup of coffee, he said with a knowing smile. It wasn't just about kindness, was it? You saw something worth saving that morning. In the company or in James? Sarah asked. Both, I suspect. He patted her shoulder. Keep reminding us what Cooper and Shaw really stands for. Later, in James's office, Sarah finally let herself break down. I almost lost everything, she whispered against his shoulder. The job, you, Emma's stability. But you didn't, he reminded her, holding her close. Because the truth was on your side. Just like that morning in the coffee shop, you didn't know who I was, but you chose kindness anyway. That's who you are, Sarah. That's why Claire's plan failed. A knock at the door interrupted them. Emma stood there with Tony, the security guard. Mom, Mr. Tony showed me the real security videos, not the fake ones. Can we add them to my scrapbook? It's like a real detective story. Sarah laughed through her tears, reaching for her daughter. Maybe we should start a new scrapbook, one about how telling the truth always wins in the end. Like in fairy tales? Emma asked, settling between them on the office couch. Better than fairy tales, James said, wrapping an arm around them both. Because this is real. Through the office windows, the Seattle skyline glittered in the afternoon. Sun. Somewhere in that city, Claire was facing the consequences of her actions. But here, in this moment, Sarah held everything that mattered, her integrity, her career, her daughter, and a love that had begun with a simple cup of coffee and grown into something stronger than any corporate scheme could break. 3 months. After Claire's departure, Cooper and Shaw felt like a different company. The new policy document on Sarah's desk spelled out changes that would have been unthinkable a year ago. Flexible working hours for parents, a mentorship program for emerging leaders, and most significantly, a complete restructuring of the corporate communication channels. Sarah watched through her office window, her new corner office with a view of the Sound, as employees gathered in the collaborative space she'd designed. Gone were the isolated cubicles and closed doors. In their place, open workstations and comfortable meeting areas encouraged the human connections that had become the company's new cornerstone. Ms. Mitchell, her new assistant, Jennifer, previously Melissa's overlooked junior colleague, appeared at her door. The leadership meeting is about to start, and marketing just reported another 50% increase in engagement since the Employee Spotlight series launched. The Employee Spotlight had been Emma's idea, born during one of their family dinner discussions. Why don't you show the real people, she'd asked, pushing her peas around her plate. Like how Mr. Tony helped me with my math homework, or how Ms. Rosa in the cafeteria remembers everyone's birthday. Those simple stories had transformed Cooper and Shaw's public image. Each week, they featured a different employee, sharing not just their professional achievements, but their human side. The series had gone viral, with other companies starting to follow their lead. In the conference room, Sarah took her place beside James. Their relationship was no longer the subject of whispers. Instead, it had become a symbol of the company's transformation. Professional boundaries remained clear, but there was no hiding the way they worked in natural sync, finishing each other's sentences during presentations. Before we begin, James addressed the room, I want to acknowledge something. 6 months ago, we were a company losing touch with our foundation. We valued procedures over people, hierarchy over humanity. He smiled at Sarah. Sometimes it takes a cup of coffee to wake you up to what really matters. The meeting proceeded, but differently than before. Junior employees spoke freely, their ideas given the same weight as senior executives. When a young programmer stumbled, during his presentation, several colleagues offered supportive comments, remembering the company's new motto, growth through guidance, success through support. After the meeting, Sarah found a post-it note on her desk in James's handwriting. "Dinner tonight. Emma promised to teach me her secret spaghetti sauce recipe." Below it sat a coffee cup from Cascade Coffee, their original meeting place. She picked up the cup, smiling at the message written on its sleeve. "Some mistakes lead to perfect endings." It had become their private joke. James's forgotten wallet that fateful morning had actually been sitting in his coat pocket the whole time. Looking around her office, Sarah saw the physical manifestations of change. Photos of the team building day she'd organized, where executives and entry-level employees worked together on community projects. The wall of thank-you notes from employees whose ideas had been implemented. The children's drawing corner she'd set up, where employees' kids could feel welcome during the new monthly family days. But the most significant change wasn't visible. It was in the atmosphere, the way people carried themselves, the laughter that now regularly echoed through the halls. Cooper and Shaw had become more than a company. It was a community. "Mom!" Emma's voice carried from the reception area. "I got an A on my business project. I wrote about how kindness can change a whole company." Sarah gathered her things, ready to head home with her daughter. As they waited for the elevator, James joined them, his tie already loosened for their casual family evening. "You know," he said, wrapping an arm around them both, "your daughter's project title would make a perfect case study for Harvard Business Review. The coffee shop effect, how one act of kindness revolutionized corporate culture." Emma beamed. "Does this mean I get extra dessert tonight?" They laughed together, stepping into the elevator as a family. Through the glass walls, they could see the sun setting over Seattle, painting the sky in the same colors as that first rainy morning when a single cup of coffee changed everything. The family calendar on Sarah's refrigerator had become a rainbow of overlapping events. Emma's dance recitals in purple, James's board meetings in blue, Sarah's marketing presentations in green, and their shared family commitments in red. Tonight's square was circled in multiple colors. Emma's school science fair coincided with a major client dinner. "We can reschedule the dinner," James suggested, watching Sarah juggle breakfast preparations while reviewing presentation notes. "The Anderson account can wait." Sarah smiled, handing him a coffee mug. Their morning ritual now happening at home instead of Cascade Coffee. "Actually, I have a better idea. Why don't we bring the Andersons to the science fair? Emma's project on corporate environmental responsibility would interest them. Converting business dinners into family events?" He pulled her close, kissing her temple. "You're revolutionizing more than just our marketing strategy." Emma bounced into the kitchen, her project board clutched to her chest. "Mom, Dad texted. He's coming to the science fair too." Sarah froze momentarily, but James's hand remained steady on her shoulder. They'd been navigating this new dynamic carefully. James's growing role in Emma's life alongside her father's sporadic reappearances. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Sarah managed. "Maybe afterward we can all get ice cream with the Andersons." "The Andersons are coming?" Emma's eyes lit up. "Can I show Mrs. Anderson how I used Cooper and Shaw's recycling data in my project?" Later that evening, Sarah watched in amazement as her past and present blended seamlessly. Her ex-husband chatting amicably with James about Emma's project. Mrs. Anderson, a formidable CEO herself, taking notes on Emma's presentation. The school gymnasium transformed into a perfect example of how personal and professional lives could coexist. "Your daughter's quite the entrepreneur," Mrs. Anderson commented, accepting a cup of punch from Sarah. "And her presentation on corporate responsibility, very impressive, though I suspect she had some expert guidance." Sarah watched Emma demonstrating her project's interactive elements to both her fathers, one by birth, one by choice. "She did it all herself, actually. James and I believe in letting her find her own path." "James," Mrs. Anderson mused, "you know, when he first told the board about you, we were skeptical. office romance, single mother, too much potential for drama. She smiled warmly. We were wrong. You've brought something special to Cooper and Shaw, to James. He brought something special to us too, Sarah replied softly. That night, after ice cream celebrations and tucking Emma into bed, Sarah found James in their home office, adding more events to the family calendar. Emma's dad wants to come to her dance recital next month, he said without looking up. I moved the Tokyo meeting so I could be there too. Is that okay? Sarah wrapped her arms around him from behind. More than okay. You know, when I bought you that coffee, I never imagined we'd be here, planning calendar logistics around blended family events. He turned to face her, eyes twinkling. Building a life where everything fits, she corrected. Work, family, love, all of it messy and complicated and perfect. The calendar caught her eye. Years of empty squares now filled with colorful possibilities. Each color-coded entry represented a piece of their beautifully chaotic life. Board meetings and ballet classes, client dinners and family game nights, all coexisting in vibrant harmony. We should add another color, James murmured against her hair, for wedding planning. Sarah's heart skipped. Is that your way of proposing? No, he smiled. That's coming later. With proper planning, board approval, and Emma's creative input. Of course, they laughed together, adding another layer to their already full life. Through the office window, Seattle's lights twinkled like stars, reminding Sarah of all the wishes that had brought her here. To this moment, this man, this perfectly balanced chaos they called home. 2 job offers lay on Sarah's desk, like playing cards in a high-stakes game. The first, embossed with Cooper and Shaw's logo, offered a promotion to Global Marketing Director, a position that would solidify her role in shaping the company's future. The second, from New York's most prestigious marketing firm, promised even more: Chief Marketing Officer, a salary that made her dizzy, and the chance to work with the biggest brands in the world. The catch? New York. 3,000 miles from Seattle. From James. You haven't touched your coffee, James observed from her office doorway. It's getting cold. Sarah looked up from the letters, finding warmth and understanding in his eyes. Of course he knew about the New York offer. The CEO of Barrett and Price had called him personally, professional courtesy between industry leaders. I remember when cold coffee was all I could afford, she said softly. When any job offer felt like winning the lottery. James crossed the room, settling into the chair across from her desk. Their usual positions reversed. Him visiting her. Office now, not the other way around. Tell me what you're thinking. I'm thinking about Emma, about you, about everything we've built here. She gestured to the window, where Seattle's familiar skyline sparkled in the afternoon sun. But I'm also thinking about that single mom who spent years fighting for opportunities like this. The one who bought coffee for strangers. The one who wanted to prove she could succeed on her own merits. Sarah met his gaze. James, if I stay, people will always wonder. They'll wonder if you chose love over ambition. He leaned forward. Sarah, you revolutionized this company. Created programs that other corporations are scrambling to copy. The only person questioning your merit is you. A knock interrupted them. Emma stood in the doorway with Tony, fresh from her after-school security desk homework sessions. Mom, can we talk about New York? Sarah's heart clenched. How did you? I heard Mrs. Chen talking about it. Emma climbed onto the office couch, her expression serious. She said you might take a job there, but what about our pizza nights? And James and my dance team? James moved to leave them alone, but Emma grabbed his hand. Stay, you're part of this too. Sarah watched them, her daughter and the man she loved, both looking at her with trust rather than expectation. The sunlight caught the edge of her Cooper and Shaw nameplate. Sarah Mitchell, Director of Marketing and Corporate Communications. You know, Emma continued thoughtfully, my teacher says sometimes the biggest opportunities are the ones we create. Ourselves, Sarah blinked. What do you mean, sweetheart? Well, you always say Cooper and Shaw is changing how companies work, right? So maybe instead of going to New York, you could make something new here, something bigger than both jobs. James's eyes lit up. She's onto something. The employee programs you've developed, the community initiatives, other companies are already asking to implement them. A consulting division, Sarah breathed. Teaching other corporations how to build genuine corporate cultures. Running. It would make you C-level, James added. But more importantly, it would be yours, something you built from scratch. Sarah looked at the job offers again, seeing them differently now. I'd need to present it to the board. Already approved, James smiled. Catherine suggested it last week. We were waiting for the right moment to discuss it. Emma bounced excitedly. Does this mean we're staying? Can I tell Mr. Tony? He was worried about finding a new homework buddy. Sarah pulled her daughter close, reaching for James's hand. Yes, we're staying. Some opportunities aren't about climbing higher. They're about building something stronger. James finished, squeezing her hand. Together. The napkin sat in the center of their usual table at Cascade Coffee. James's neat handwriting, spelling out the words that would change their lives once again. Will you marry me? Sarah stared at it, tears blurring her vision. Around them, the coffee shop hummed with morning activity, oblivious to the moment unfolding in their corner. The same barista who'd witnessed their first meeting was trying very hard to look busy while stealing glances their way. I thought about doing this in some elaborate way, James said softly, reaching across the table to take her hand. But this is where our story began, where a cup of coffee and an act of kindness turned into something extraordinary. Mom, can I give her the ring now? Emma's excited whisper came from behind the counter, where she'd been hiding with Tony from Cooper and Shaw Security and Catherine, all of them grinning like co-conspirators. Sarah laughed through her tears. You got everyone involved? Actually, James smiled, they all helped plan it. Emma designed the ring, said it had to have a coffee bean engraved inside because that's your origin story. Catherine found the perfect jeweler. Even Tony helped, by keeping Emma's secret all week, which I'm told was quite the challenge. Emma bounded over, proudly holding out a velvet box. Inside, the ring caught the morning light. Elegant but not flashy, with a subtle coffee bean design etched in the band, just as Emma had specified. There's more, James continued, pulling out a folder. The board approved the new consulting division yesterday, Mitchell Consulting Group, a subsidiary of Cooper and Shaw, but operating under your leadership. Your own company, Sarah. Because you didn't just change my life that morning. You showed us all a better way to do business. Sarah looked around at the faces she loved, her daughter practically vibrating with excitement, James's eyes full of love and pride, Catherine wiping away tears, Tony pretending he wasn't emotional while filming everything on his phone. This was her family, expanded in ways she never could have imagined that rainy morning a year ago. Well, Emma prompted, are you going to say yes? Because James promised we could get hot chocolate to celebrate, and I really want hot chocolate. Sarah laughed, the joy bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. Yes, she said, looking into James's eyes. Yes to all of it. The ring, the company, the family we've built. Yes to forever. James slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her close for a kiss that tasted like coffee and happiness and promises. The entire coffee shop erupted in applause. Apparently, everyone had been watching after all. I have one condition, Sarah whispered against his lips. Anything. We keep our standing pizza nights, no matter how busy either company gets. Already in the contract, he grinned. Emma insisted. It's in the fine print right after the clause about mandatory family. Game nights and daddy-daughter dance recital attendance. Emma squeezed between them for a group hug. I added that we have to come back to this coffee shop every year on your anniversary. For the story. For the story, Sarah agreed, holding her family close. Through the window, she could see the Cooper, and Shaw building rising against the Seattle sky. No longer an impossible dream, but a symbol of everything they'd achieved together. The barista appeared with a tray of hot chocolates, gesturing at the congratulations sign that had mysteriously appeared behind the counter. As they celebrated with their impromptu coffee shop family, Sarah realized that some love stories weren't about fairy tale endings. They were about building something real, one cup of coffee, one act of kindness, one leap of faith at a time. 1 year later, a framed coffee-stained receipt hung in the lobby of Cooper & Shaw alongside the photos of the company's founders. Below it, a simple plaque read, "Sometimes the smallest acts of kindness change everything." Sarah paused before it, adjusting her wedding ring, the coffee bean design now worn smooth from her habit of touching it for luck. Behind her, the lobby bustled with activity as employees from different companies arrived for Mitchell Consulting Group's first corporate culture symposium. "Ready for your keynote?" James appeared at her side, straightening his tie. Almost. She smiled at their reflection in the glass. "Just remembering, Mom," Emma called from the reception desk, where she sat with Tony, reviewing her latest business proposal. At 9, she'd already appointed herself junior consultant to both companies. "Can I tell them the coffee shop story, please?" "I think," James said, wrapping an arm around Sarah's waist, "that's exactly how we should start." They walked together toward the conference room, past walls now lined with employee photos and stories, past the open, collaborative spaces where teams worked in comfortable synchronicity, past all the changes that had grown from one simple cup of coffee. Sarah took the stage, looking out at faces eager to learn the secret of Cooper & Shaw's transformation. She touched her ring once more, then smiled. "Let me tell you about a rainy morning in Seattle," she began, "when $27 in a bank account turned out to be exactly enough to change everything." In the front row, James and Emma beamed up at her, their love reflecting the truth. In every word, sometimes the best investments aren't measured in dollars and cents, but in the courage to be kind, the strength to be genuine, and the wisdom to recognize that real success is about more than the bottom line. It's about building something that lasts, one cup of coffee at a time.